live again for another show through space. We got a gorgeous moon tonight. It's actually 12:11 a.m., so morning already. 12:16, oh actually 10:16, sorry, October 16th. Saturday night into Sunday morning. Coming back at you with a bunch of new ideas tonight. Just waiting for some of our friends to show up. I got a 63.4% waning gibbous moon coming up in the east for me. Got the 11 set up tonight. Also I see some Mars overhead. So play a few tunes and rev up the engines. Some thoughts tonight about wormholes and quantum mechanics. Some thoughts about optics and stellar metamorphosis, and just where we are in terms of science and consciousness. And so, yeah, lots of new revelations the past few days of studying, and we'll talk more about it in a little bit. Let's get this song going here. I have no headphones right now, I'm charging them, so doing this blind without monitors. Make sure you got that 4K set, share the stream, and let's get going. You're gone. We live the fascination of our heartbeats. Never aboard, never aboard, never aboard. Why don't you try? Oh, don't you try? couple of tunes, just starting it off. Feels weird to do it without headphones. I'm like just charging them up for a second, but I'm totally in silence here while everything plays. Anyway, want to hop in, say what's up to the chat. I see Charles Thomason at the top, Genghis Khan, Ellie Wynn. Great to see you folks. 12:20 a.m., roaming around the moon for a little bit. I have a lot to talk about, but I want to make sure we have a few people in here, just so I don't have to repeat myself too many times tonight. But yeah, I've been studying a bunch of stuff recently, and I'll just come right out and say it. I've been working on putting together my version of this theory of everything, connecting all the dots. And so I started looking into a few different avenues a little more deeply the past few days. Of course, I think I watched about 20 or 30 of Jeffrey Walensky's Stellar Metamorphosis videos just to really dig in deeper. He's been doing it for so long, at least about 10 years. So really, if you haven't checked out Stellar Metamorphosis, Jeffrey Walensky, just what a champ, you know? There were some videos I found where he talks about aliens and stuff, which I'll get into, but I don't have to agree with him about absolutely everything, but Stellar Metamorphosis is really, really brilliant. But yeah, I see Meredith. What's going on, Meredith? Genghis Khan says, started watching Stuart Talbot, Electric Jupiter Baffles Astronomers. Yeah, the one from today, right? It's pretty, thanks for bringing that up. It's like so perfect. It's exactly what I've been studying. So I dug into I started to kind of look into the cores of planets, right? Counter rotation, the poles of planets, the spin rates of planets, the contemporary understanding of planets right now. And I looked on YouTube, I looked on Wiki, I looked in different, I searched Google, I went through papers. I found a lot of interesting data, and some of the stuff, particularly about Jupiter, is really fascinating because there are certain videos about where they have the entire crew of people who worked on the Juno missions and the science, and you listen to the different parts of it in this kind of all these different measurements they took and how they got the missions there, what they were testing for, what they found at Jupiter. And I think Stuart Talbot touches on it in this video, which is these vortexial or vortice storms at the poles, but also these storms that are surrounded by other storms, or like spiraling storms. And the outside spiraling forms almost look hexagonal or octagonal, and he mentioned that, which is great. Don't blast the bass too hard. Well, I'm going to be talking a bunch, I think, tonight because I just have a lot on my mind. I'm just trying to sort through it. But I think a big thing before I get into Jupiter is just that I put this idea together where, I'm sure you've heard of the idea of a wormhole or an Einstein-Rosen bridge where the fabric of space-time is folded over and they push the pencil through it and they create this tunnel. And then I started to look into, if for some reason that came up, of course, because there's the whole study of black holes right now, the Nobel Prize of Quantum Entanglement, I started looking into sort of things like that. And I came to the conclusion, to fast forward, is that wormholes are actually Birkeland sheaths. Our Birkeland currents are these actual hourglass shape, or the hypertrochoid that I talk about, which is the center of a torus. This actually is the shape of a wormhole. And then you also have microtubules in quantum mechanics, which are also these sheaths. So in fact, wormholes, one, are real, but they're actually the outline of a Birkeland current. And the Birkeland current is really the electrical casing for the electrical filament in the middle. And then I realized that strings might be electrical filaments. Like lightning bolts at the very smallest quantum scale are what they call strings. And then on the cosmological scale, it's Birkeland currents or electrical filaments. And then encased around those are these pinched plasma tubes. And the tubes are wormholes or microtubules. And so that's a connection. let me know what you think of that. I mean, it might seem obvious, but I looked it up and I'm like, nobody's really made this connection before because they deem wormholes kind of theoretical. And of course, everyone's on the bandwagon right now of like I've mentioned before, even the alternative science, of course, conspiracy and mainstream, everybody's trying to say that person's wrong, this person's totally canceled, this person sucks. Don't believe Einstein, don't believe string theory, but you know that I'm trying to take these little pieces from all of them and put it all together. So Einstein proposes this wormhole idea, but really what he's measuring is a Birkeland current, or like the sheath around a wire. And so yeah, wormholes might be real or seem to be real, but they're alluding to this actual phenomenon that we do understand. And then quantum microtubules are also real. They're the sheaths around strings, and strings are electrical filaments. So I think that's kind of big. I don't know, tell me, maybe I'm crazy, but I feel like that's one of those huge connections that just clicked for me today, and it feels like it's correct. What's up, effed up world? How you doing? Welcome. I don't know. I mean, y'all know that I try not to like overhype anything or even stuff that I think about, but that connection of just understanding like all at once this idea of wormholes, and then the idea of microtubules and the idea of strings, which I studied a lot about string theory, but you never really think about it in terms of, no, it's just what we've been looking at, like cosmological lightning bolts are the space version of quantum strings. And quantum strings are wiggles, and so yeah, so let's take it further. The outline, every filament is a twisted coaxial filament, like a braid, and therefore this is where spin comes from. All spin and all reality comes from the torsion or the spin of these coaxial filaments. So everything, every hydrogen atom, every electron, every human, every planet, every galaxy is fed from the outside into its core by these electrical filaments. These electrical filaments look like concentric rings, and they're counter-rotating. So the counter-rotation, if we want to think about it just in terms of what it looks like, is just imagine Jupiter, or don't imagine Jupiter, just take a look at Jupiter, and you see it exactly, like the elements outline themselves around the filaments or the sheaths of a Birkeland filament. So there's an electrical thunderbolt going through Jupiter, powering it, goes out the backside, the bottom side, top side, bottom side. And this is another thing I'll tell you that I've heard about, which is just crazy, which is, so imagine, let's say that the funnel top half of this Birkeland tube, or this pinched plasma tube, or this wormhole or microtubule, this top of it is a black hole, and the bottom of it is a white hole, or vice versa, right? And so what science refers to as a black hole actually has a counterpart, a white hole, which is akin in a way to a human or creature. So we are actually outlines as creatures of wormholes. We have a white hole and a black hole, and we ingest and excrete information and food. And so do active galactic nuclei, and so do hydrogen atoms. And so do planets and stars by sucking in matter and processing it. And therefore, so a black hole is not, now to understand a black hole, it's no longer like a real object, but it's actually a real thing because it's the outline of a Birkeland current. It's the top half of this pinched plasma tube. And we know that if filaments go through the entire cosmos and connect everything, so at the top of every planet and the bottom of every planet, you have a black hole, white hole idea, concept. And on an intergalactic scale, you see these huge things, and that's what I believe is kind of strings, for string theory, is now electrical filaments. Wormholes are microtubules or plasma sheaths. Black holes and white holes are the mouths of the Birkeland filament sheaths, just outlining them. Therefore, both parties are satisfied who say black holes don't exist. They're not really a thing. They're actually an outline of a larger thing. And so you do see them ultimately in space because they're swallowing up energy and processing energy and excreting energy. So those are a couple of like pretty big ideas that I've stumbled across. They might just be pretty obvious to everybody, but to me, it seems like a few things have been answered in my field. So, yeah, let me know if you want me to explain it a bit further, but if it makes sense, you know, the hourglass shape, this hypotrochoid or the pinched plasma tube, is around a Z-pinch. The Z-pinch is the chakra, is a heart, is a nucleus of an atom, is the center of a solar system. And the counter-rotation and the bands are outlined by orbital mechanics, by small and large solar systems, by active galactic nuclei, by human bodies. Your arm, basically, is dendritic tree rings are basically these kind of outlines of a Birkeland current. And so a tree really grows along a filament, and therefore you see the actual echo imprint of a Birkeland filament in tree rings. So just not to neglect the moon here, checking out, you see Valles Alpes. We're looking at Mare Frigoris, the top of Mare Imbrium, Plato crater, Archimedes, Autolycus, Aristillus. Top right is Sea of Serenity. So interesting angle tonight. Yeah, but Valles Alpes, that sharp gash through the Alpine mountain range, is so prominent. So those are a couple of things. Figured out what wormholes are. And so it kind of takes away a little bit of the mystery of this idea that, you know, Einstein-Rosen bridge or fold space-time to create a wormhole. Wormholes and microtubules and sheaths, plasma sheaths, become a norm, become a regular thing that occurs at all sizes. And occurs for a reason, because around an electrical wire, a sheath is created, and these sheaths are counter-rotating. And if we want to see them in reality, you can just look at Jupiter, and you see that it actually is sorting its materials based on this actual counter-rotation. And so the reason it doesn't look like a cylinder is because the poles are pinched. So you get the pinch, the compression rarefaction, like squeeze, release, squeeze, release, squeeze, release. And at the poles, a planet is pinched, but it's actually an outline of counter-rotating cylinders, and which in turn actually is the outline of a Birkeland filament. And the spin, the axial inertial momentum, comes from the twisting of this coaxial torsion filament. I keep adding words in here, but I'm basically trying to really pull all these words together and present them as the fact that they're pretty much the same thing. Everybody seems to be talking about these specialist topics, and it's like saying, hey, I only deal with the teeth, I only deal with the liver, not realizing that the overall health of the body is a larger, big picture idea. And so the big picture idea here is that it's not just an electrical universe, it's not just stellar metamorphosis, and I can sort of explain why it's not any of those specific ones, why it's a little bit of each of them. So for example, I was watching the Michael Claridge video, and he was showing a chart about orders of magnitude, and he was saying, like, he was conflating certain dogmatic ways of looking at the universe with how orders of magnitude were wrong for some reason, and I just didn't actually jive with that. And I like Michael Claridge a lot, but I think in a way, Electric Universe has gotten a little bit too into the weeds in terms of saying how incorrect things are versus integrating things. Does that make sense? So if we were to integrate into Electric Universe, which I think the Donald Scott idea of electric stars and these Bessel functions, which are basically just like wavy record players, and Buddy's nested donuts, or the hop vibrations. Really, the donut is basically like, if you imagine your eye has a donut energy ring around it. And your eye also, looking onwards, also is an energy donut ring in a way. And not in a way, it just is that. It's also a black hole, white hole situation. Your eyes are wormholes. So is the heart. So are all the chakras. Basically are connected via a filament that goes through the head, goes into the ground, and all your stars or all your chakras are along this pearls on a string. But each of these pearls on a string also has a donut, toroidal plasma donut around it, and also resonates with its field. What else did I look into? I looked into these experiments about how the eyes actually emit low-level radiation and how they've done experiments. For example, like the simplest one being that you can look at your phone and it recognizes that you're looking at it. So what's going on there? Your eyes actually send out a signal. And this is something that's almost not talked about. There are almost no videos about it. But if our eyes are actually shooting out information or data or signals to pick up on things in the field, then this is a whole other layer of optics. So I dug in pretty deeply into, I looked up MIT courses and papers and lectures on advanced optics and geometry and trig and stuff like that. And what I was really looking for is to figure out if anybody has talked about or has figured out infinity focus or vanishing point, or why when we look into space, everything is focused at the same level, and other ideas like that. I think the moon's getting a bit dim because it's behind the telephone pole right now, so nothing to worry about. It'll be back in a few. So these are some ideas. What was I going on about these toroidal plasma rings, right? So the human body is a wormhole. Worms are wormholes. Creatures, like all animals, basically have a mouth and a butt, and our universe has a mouth and a butt, and atoms have microtubules. Literally, the structure of an atom is this hypotrochoid donut structure, and the donut is where the hop vibrations are happening, the buddy's donut stuff. I know, it's getting pretty funny here. But then this pinched plasma tube is actually Einstein-Rosen bridge wormhole concept, so we can integrate that. Then we can integrate black holes and white holes as the things that are not necessarily reified, not themselves objects, but in fact the openings and closings of wormholes, which are plasma sheaths. I think it's a pretty big idea. I'm not seeing any comments, but let me know if anybody has any thoughts so far. Let's read what Genghis says. Genghis says, I keep an open mind. I think with more tech and time, we figure out a little more. Let's see. Black hole burps at half the speed of light years after devouring stars. And then follows up with, this caught us completely by surprise. No one has ever seen anything like this before. So yeah, looking up Jupiter and planetary cores, formations of planets, clumping of matter to create planets. I saw more scientists baffled headlines than I've ever seen in one sitting, in 1 week. But this is the thing. I saw a great video from Jeffrey today, Jeffrey Walensky, where he talks about how who cares if it's peer-reviewed or not peer-reviewed? You're free as a person to just believe what you want to believe. And if you stumble across an idea like stellar metamorphosis that really makes a lot of sense, then who cares if Lawrence Krauss or Neil deGrasse or Richard Dawkins agrees with it, or even Velikovsky or even Thunderbolts Project, if they agree with stellar metamorphosis? You're free to trust your intuition and infer what you want from the universe. So what's cool is that people can learn on YouTube now as they wish. You don't need the dogmatic academics to actually come up with the new stuff, because people are just coming up with new stuff on the fly. And you might say, that's dangerous because a lot of crazy theories come up, but I'll say that, if you're diligent, you can get through a lot of the kind of the theories that don't really make a lot of sense and get to a place where we do have a way to connect the dots here. So, yeah, wormholes, strings, counter-rotation of Jupiter. Another interesting idea is what is going on with the storm on Jupiter. The storm on Jupiter is like a filament going right into the almost equator, into Jupiter at a right angle. And Saturn actually has a storm similar, and so does, I think, Neptune also has a storm, not at the equator, but at a lower band, kind of. And I started to think Earth probably has this too, and so do all planets, I think, that we see that are not moons, Mars, Mercury, things that are dead, basically. That there's an electrical filament going right angle to the electromagnetic wormhole. Yes, Birkeland filament. Let's see. The Zeke 1970 says, after the past couple of years, I place far less stock in peer-reviewed. Well, that's good, because peer-reviewed means that a group of people that may completely want to hide information can decide what gets out there, you know? And then because of traditional kind of propagandism and conditioning, people tend to use that as a tool to say, hey, I won't even entertain this idea if it's not peer-reviewed or if it's not in a magazine. But over time, a lot more people now look at the news and they're like, we don't trust the news. But 20 years ago, when I started not trusting the news, a lot more people still trusted the news. Well, where would you get your news from if you don't read, the Huffington Post, or if you don't watch CNN? CNN is bad, but PBS is better. You know what I'm saying? But now, 20 years later, a few people are like, well, I think all the news is kind of bad. But it's way worse than that, right? Like, the news is literally like so corrupt, it's insane. And they make up new ideas to make people, to keep people on edge, and are far more organized than people imagine. So I think it's like that with science, and I like where Jeffrey's coming from, where like, so what if, like I'm saying, like well, I don't want to, it's not to denigrate anyone either, because I really like Dr. Pierre-Marie Robitaille, and I like Thunderbolts Project, like I said, Michael Claridge, Stuart Talbot. But again, like, why isn't Stuart Talbot entertaining stellar metamorphosis, right? Like, and why don't they have an updated thing with Rupert Sheldrake? That's like, there was a good comment in there. It's like, why show his thing from 10 years ago, even though it's very good? Why don't you just have Wall and Rupert Sheldrake talk on a phone, or whatever? It's kind of nuts that we don't have that. But so yeah, the news is totally corrupt. But so we have science news, which was one of these last bastions, where people thought, well, political news is super corrupt, and war news is, it's the same thing, but financial news is really corrupt, and local news is stupid and racist. But science news, that's that one place where we can trust, because science, and now people are starting to see that you can't really do that, because it's almost even worse in science, because it makes it both extremely complicated but also extremely boring, which is a very fascinating combination of feelings. And most people don't know anything about the moon or space or science at all, except what they've been told by Science Channel or National Geographic. Like, there is no official source. When I was looking up, like, what's the official update on what we know as a human race about Jupiter? It just doesn't exist. The moon's getting nice and sharp. I think it's just cleared the telephone pole. Looking at a great shot of Mare Imbrium here. 63.8%, 63.4 waning gibbous here. It's been a few days since I've streamed. It was good to take a little break, but also study a bunch. Like, gosh, I studied a lot. And I think I came to some pretty interesting conclusions about a bunch of things. I see Gnostic Chef in the chat. What's happening? Good to see you. Welcome, welcome. So no thoughts on wormholes and strings being electrical filaments, and white holes, black holes being the mouths of wormholes, and humans and creatures being wormholes? Throw me something, people. Let me know if I'm on the right track here. Like, it totally sounds nuts. I think, to me, when I thought about it, it was like, seemed again so obvious, but when I really put it into context, I was like, wow, that answers so many things all at once. moving back down to the southern region, we got Clavius and Tycho looking really amazing. Terminator coming through almost at a half our last quarter. And then next month we got a, is it a supermoon? I don't know if it's a supermoon, but it's definitely a lunar eclipse next month. Anyway, if you want me to shut up and play some music, also let me know, because I can do that. But yeah. What else did I look up? I looked up, yeah, so counter rotation and tornadoes, basically. So this thing on Jupiter. So I was looking up. Okay, so I looked up the panel, like Scott Bolton and his team giving the latest assessment on the Juno data. So anything related to Io, to Europa, to Ganymede. They don't really talk about Callisto, and then Jupiter, the storms, the poles. And you start to realize that they don't really talk about, well, this whole press conference is an hour and a half, and I think, I want to say like 40% of it was different people saying that they had to go back to the drawing board. Essentially, that they'd throw out all that they knew about Jupiter, and everything they expected to find, they found something a bit different. And like, there's nothing wrong with that inherently, but there is also something really funny about it, because there's no actual substantial solves or solutions to things. There's a lot of describing. So they describe a lot of the Jupiter process and the flight paths and what type of data they were supposed to get, what the instruments were. And they talk about their plans and their expectations. And they also talk about they couldn't have expected, or they were baffled by Jupiter data. And the primary things there, I think, are the rings of Jupiter, not the rings, well, there are the rings, but the bands of Jupiter and the counter-rotation. The interaction of the bands being these diachotron flows, or laminar or shear flows, or magnetohydrodynamic flows. Why is it counter-rotating? What's the core? What are the storms? Why are the storms nested spirals and hexagons? And none of that has been solved. None of that has even been talked about, really, in a sense of like, here are some options. They had one woman on the panel that talked about, she showed some Atlantic Ocean currents with, what was it? Was it like algae blooms? And she showed similar, basically these very similar swirling, if you look at smoke rising, or you look at these very complex shearing of like flowing fractal water patterns that are tightly bound. These patterns on Jupiter are found on Earth. And so she was trying to correlate fluid dynamics with what's going on the bands of Jupiter. Now that brings into question a whole bunch of things as to like, what is what do we see on Jupiter, what's beneath the surface, and what is the core like? And so she gets to a point where she's about to make the correlation between, like actually just to say something substantial about it, instead of just saying, I saw this on Earth and we see this on Jupiter, isn't that interesting? So she gets to, isn't that interesting? And then I'm like, what else are you going to say? And she gets to a point, she's like, okay, well, here's on the pole of Jupiter, we see a vortice, like a tornado system, and then around it we see 6 to 8 other tornadoes at the points. And this is basically outlining a hexagon. So it's a tornado surrounded by tornadoes. But if you imagine, it's like a wire surrounded by a bunch of wires. And when you tightly bound wires, if you look at any cable right now in your house, and you cut it and you chop it with the scissors, you'll see these kind of nested coils. So essentially Jupiter and its field, and pretty much everything, but Jupiter in this case, is actually outlining a Birkeland current, and it has a filament going through it. And the filament is twisting, and that's creating the polar storms. And then the little poles around it, all these storms, this diachotron instability, are other smaller Birkeland filaments that surround the center one. The counter-rotation of the bands is the outlining of the plasma sheaths. And then you have the storm, which is an electrical filament going at a right angle to this. So it's two kind of crossing electrical filaments. So you have like who am I to decipher this? But I was listening to this panel feeling like, wait, you guys are not really telling me anything like substantial, and there's just a lot of fluff and a lot of like we have no idea, and this is where Thunderbolts basically says, well, these guys are not going back and changing their ideas and not going back to the drawing board. They keep insisting, and I agree with that in terms of what Thunderbolts says, but it doesn't mean that somebody like me or Jeffrey Walensky or even Thunderbolts can take it one step further. So even the video today where he was showing exactly that picture of the nested tornadoes on Jupiter, or vortexial forms on Jupiter, Stewart could have just kept going with the fact that you had the electrical filaments going through it, and these filaments are coaxial, and this is where spin comes from, and on and on and on. There's a lot more to dig into and unpack with how we get spin in stars and planets. So let's see. Genghis says, wormholes, I imagine, could be like arteries, allowing matter to travel from one area to another. And what's keeping them going, like here, a storm starts and eventually fades out, like the ones on Jupiter's poles, they say just keeps on going since we've been observing them. So that's where, like, so in terms of the arteries, I mean, I think the fascia and the entire body is essentially fractally recursive, or basically the same shape over and over and over again at different scales. And I think our entire organism is structured around Birkeland filaments. So our whole nervous system, if you type in human nervous system real image, you'll see that we're just like a bunch of wires, and these wires are surrounded by more and more packed, almost nested hexagons or nested cylinders. That's our limbs, our epidermis, dermis, epidermis, and then the hair, and then our outer kind of energy shell, and then our plasma biofield. And so we essentially look like an apple if we took our field and the human together. And I think that's really holistic and really fulfilling. And then what's keeping them going in terms of the storms on Jupiter, I think that if you bring in stellar metamorphosis and you realize that something like Jupiter is actually halfway between our sun and potentially a habitable Earth, you realize that Jupiter is much more active and more youthful than the Earth, or even Uranus and Neptune. And it's actually creating more complex life, and all the matter that it's sucking in is actually going down, creating more and more of a core, versus having a core originally. This is a whole other thing about Jupiter's fuzzy core versus does it have a core. So years ago, the science was that the mainstream said Jupiter definitely does have a core because it has a giant magnetic field. But now the Juno data actually says there's a fuzzy core. And they say it's a fuzzy core, which means it's like a loose amalgam of liquid metallic hydrogen. And so there's also a lot of wordplay around, not wordplay, but just like linguistic gymnastic about what liquid metallic hydrogen is versus, is it a liquid, is it a gas, is this a gas giant? And I may sound like I don't know what I'm talking about, but if you really look into it, you see that there's a lot of, one, undiscovered stuff about Jupiter, but two, if you take it at face value, you realize that they can't tell for sure what's at the core of Jupiter. And therefore, if you can't tell, then you have to change old science, and that's probably happening at some point. And then you also have to figure out what's powering Jupiter. And so if Jupiter is younger than something like Earth, then its electrical potential and its field interaction is really second to only the sun at this point. So it's like a tiny sun within, like next to our sun. Mainstream cosmology and astronomy doesn't allow for that, but in an electrical system where things move around and exchange currents and exchange nodes, maybe, it is possible. So Electric Universe actually supports this stellar metamorphosis. What's going on, Yo Q? Yo Yo. Yeah, so those are some thoughts. So storms on Jupiter being really, the idea of a storm at all is the fact that there's a twisting, braiding filament going through this storm. And around a twisting braided filament is nested tubes. And at the nodes, at the Z pinches, this is where a tube pinches and it looks like an hourglass. It looks like the counter space of a torus, like the inner part of a torus or a hypotrochoid. And it also looks like a wormhole. And it also looks like a microtubule. And it also looks like a human organism with a mouth and a butt, you know what I mean? So humans are essentially wormholes, and worms are wormholes, and so are planets, and on and on. And I think, to reiterate the other thing, which is strings, in string theory or superstring theory, this is just alluding to electrical wiggles or lightning bolts at the Earth scale. And above that, you have red sprites, blue sprites, angels, and all those really thick bundled lightning. And then when your finger touches a doorknob, it's tiny, it's like in between real lightning and a string. And at the very quantum scale, or superstring scale, it's really a tiny little lightning bolt. So it's a wiggle. So that's what strings are, and microtubules. And wormholes and black holes and white holes are cosmological versions of plasma Birkeland filaments, or Birkeland current sheaths. So, saying that a bunch of times, because why not? No ego here, just feeling like I made a little bit of a discovery or kind of a connection that I hadn't made before. So I want to make sure I say it clearly and articulate it well. But also look at this gorgeous moon tonight, like amazing little features. You see all these little nodules and cuts and Rima Hyginus and what is that, Ptolemaeus. Really good. Let's hang out here for a moment. Yeah, let me know what's up, chat. I mentioned earlier about optics, so I looked into optics, into like why does everything come into focus? So the sun, the moon, the stars, and the planets all come into focus at a certain distance when we look out into space. This answer doesn't exist really almost anywhere. The closest I got to it is something called, what is it? The far point, or vanishing point, or infinity focus. But if you look up either of those terms, you'll find that like there's not really there's just a lot of describing what happens, but not why this happens. So they don't talk about the cone of vision, the fact that vision comes to a point because of a certain reason. They just say vision comes to a point. Shout out Vision is Scary if you ever catch this. Hope you're doing great. So yeah, so in the distance, things come to a point. Why? Why do things come to a point? So I looked into some advanced trigonometry lessons on optics and tried to figure out if somebody had really come up with the math behind this or why this occurs, just in general. And of course you can look up a million things a million times over, but I could not find any real reference to it, anything that really satisfied my question. So why I think it happens is because the eye actually emits light, low frequency light, and it resonates, this type of light resonates with the frequency of the Earth, the Schumann resonance. And Eileen McCusick talks about this a lot, and so does Rupert Sheldrake. But we send out low emission radiation from the human body, and because there are eye sockets, like light sockets, bulb sockets, our eyes actually emit light because there's holes cut out of our skull. Our brain is actually a Z-pinch, and it's emanating low-frequency radio waves. And when you look up at space, our eyes are actually sending a signal out into the field. And every star and planet is also resonating and sending out their signal because they are giant eyeballs. Right? Like Jupiter is not a stack of stars, it's a singular star. So it's like one of our chakras, but on a cosmological scale. So the sun is like a heart, or you could imagine it's like a singular knot of plasma. So humans are a very complex chain of plasma knots, and therefore our complex the complexity of our organism allows us to experience life as this deep fractal. And whereas like a planet maybe has like a cosmological influence, but a more simple interaction with the universe. I don't know that for sure. But see Alice in Winterland, what's happening? Welcome. Silent Murmur, I see in there what's going on, says our bodies run at around 12 gigahertz. So our bodies are, yeah, I remember Vision is Scary, Ellie. So yeah, our bodies are antennas inside fields. So together, if you looked at if you were able to see a human biofield around a person and also the person, we would just, I imagine, look like an apple. People equal apple. So yeah, we are resonant beings, essentially vibrating light, experiencing ourselves as everyone else and everything else. And we manifest from pure boundless consciousness via Markland convection, the entire universe's potential processes. By actually observing one of the processes, we collapse the so-called wave function and instantiate a magnetic moment or a dipole moment. And this is what we perceive as, we consider consciousness, because it's awareness of the field and reaction to the field. And that reaction is stored as an echo in the field, and therefore you can always refer back to it. And the future has not yet been created. We create it as we resonate and oscillate in the field, moment to moment. Yep, Ellie. I don't know, some people got mad at me over the years. I never know why, like, I mean, I think I brought it up ages ago. Remember Starlight Spectrum? She also got mad at me for some reason. I think it was like, I mean, if I'm being honest, I think Vision thought I didn't shout him out in the chat, and no matter what I apologized, like no matter how much I apologized for missing him in the chat, I think he took it too personally. I think the statute of limitations on talking about this is probably passed at this point, so I can say it. It's really that dumb. You know how I am. It's like dark mode on the back end of this stream, and I barely can read comments because it's like bright white text on black background. And I think I was just shouting out a whole bunch of, you know how I go through the roll call sometimes, and I'll absolutely blind spot miss people. And I think he literally thought I didn't shout him out because he had said something prior, straight up, and then I never came to the show again. And then Starlight Spectrum, she used to come to every show. She was first on every show. I think the last show she was on, I said something akin to like, we're not supposed to save the world. like, or like, I don't want to save the world, or some shit like that. And it wasn't because I'm cynical. It's because of my Zen teachings of like not wanting to fix things too much. If you fiddle with things too much, you know, like kindly let me help you up the tree, said the monkey to the fish, you know, taking them safely out of harm's way. You know, sometimes you're not supposed to save the fish. So, and that was it. I think I never saw her again. And yeah, it's weird. Those are just a couple of stories of people that like I know, like it was just cozy and cool, and then it was just not. But if they hear this, I hope y'all are doing great. Like no harm, no foul. I think that's how it goes in streaming. In the streaming world, you just gotta roll with it. I don't want to neglect the moon. I'm looking at it, looking at her. She's looking absolutely amazing. Mare Imbrium, like perfect detail tonight. Archimedes, Apennine Mountain. You can see the Valles Alpes up there. You know what I'm saying, Ellie? Gosh. But times change. And so, right. So big stuff for me today, at least this week. Like I said, understanding wormholes, black holes, white holes, strings, big deal. Digging into Jeffrey's stellar metamorphosis much more deeply and realizing, like, of course stellar metamorphosis is correct. in at least the premise of it is much more correct than where we are with clumping. Looked into a lot of the idea of clumping, like basically a stellar like accretion disk model or protoplanetary model. Then you go and see recently they just did a whole simulation on the Earth and the Moon, like how the Moon was formed, this kind of orange lava simulation of particles. Just a little, what is it? Just a little rabbit hole on the whole simulation thing. Like, I've worked on simulations before, and they get away so much with this. It's supercomputers, and it's quantum computers, and it's trillions of particles, and it's like, yeah, but anybody who's worked in 3D will know that you can actually simulate a lot of crazy stuff nowadays, and computers are all supercomputers. And the stuff they're doing with this whole something hit Thea, and then the blobby Earth that was all magma came together. Just this whole idea of how the Moon was formed. Of course, the biggest thing is they serve up this simulation without any context. That's the biggest faux pas. And they also don't serve it up with a scientist and a picture of the Moon and a picture of Earth, and they're like, this is how we think it happened. So, like, that alone is just ridiculous. But then of course, you can't get this thing to work. Like, if you gave people the simulate, they also don't tell people what the computer was. They don't tell them what particle software they were using. Of course, these are probably not homebrew, but laboratory, like custom build solutions. But either way, if you follow 2-minute physics on YouTube, you see where particle simulation is at, and it's absolutely crazy what you can come up with. You can create a lot of simulations that look real, but are not actually what we perceive as reality. So, what can I say to that? Except it's ridiculous. All right, take a little break here. Would definitely love to hear your thoughts on some of these ideas and keep the conversation going. I definitely have a few other things that I can talk about, but really the signature of the Birkeland current being 1, all over the Moon, 2, being at every pole, electromagnetic pole of every item, every instantiation of consciousness from human to planet to atom is plugged in through a Birkeland current, just like you imagine we are plugged into the Matrix. We have wires coming into us at every level and wires going out of us. These wires have sheaths. These sheaths go by many names. One of them is a wormhole or a tubule, another is a Birkeland current. And the filament inside it, the electrical bolt, is a string. Black hole, white hole, mouths of the wormhole. Humans are wormholes. Yeah, I think it makes sense. Silent Murmur says, yeah, we can't save the world or people unless we really recognize all the variables. I don't think you can, the idea of saving things, you can, this is what I got to, is that it's not like you can't save things. You can make it your life's purpose to save people or to not save people. Either works, is what Zen teaches, right? It doesn't say don't save people. It just says you can save or not save. We're basically the same creature having an experience. So whether you choose to save the princess from the dragon or you choose to completely ignore it and play video games, both are equally Buddha or both are equally Zen. And the reason that they are equally Zen is because there is no other person or deity that you can ask and say, is it better to save or is it better to destroy, waste time or destroy? And there is no answers etched into the sky. The self, the Atman or the Brahma or the Brahman, is the one that decides, and you are you are it. So you, being the decider of all things and having had it your own way this whole time, ends up being the judge of saving things or not saving things. So if you think it's good to save things, then by all means go save things. And if you feel like you want to just be a person on the street and do nothing, then but do it with vigor. if I'm channeling Watts correctly, do it with gusto. Just don't be limp, no matter what you choose to do. Silent Murmur says, true, but also saved from what exactly? No, but you know what I'm saying. Like, I mean, the aim is also to not question it too much, right? If you spend time questioning whether you're going to save or not save, then you're spending time questioning as opposed to living. You know, another interesting koan is the one where the two monks come to a river, and one of the monks sees this woman at the side and she needs help, so he puts the woman on his shoulders and they go across the river. He puts the woman down and goes on his way. The monk, his partner, his friend is looking at him. He's saying, hey, how could you do that? That was blasphemous. You touched another person and you shouldn't. And he said, what? Oh, you mean that woman? I left her by the river. You're the one still carrying her. And the monk had a revelation, which is, you know, don't think about it too much. Just do the thing. And if it's a good thing, it's a good thing. If it's a bad thing, it's a bad thing. Clouds make no mistakes. Rivers make no mistakes. Why you, O weary one, would you think you as a human would make mistakes? We're an expression of nature, even the bad, even what we perceive as bad, because it's the counter space to good. Most of the world operates pretty good. But in fact, it's a game of basically inverse proportions. So a tiny fraction of the world does most of the bad, but they influence a lot. And most of the world is pretty good, but they don't do much. You know, and it's the same as what we see. You know, it's the seeds of the apple and the flesh of the apple. And again, you can spend time spinning over the moment, as long as you know that that's what you're doing. And I hope I don't sound too pompous about it. Just it clicked with me years ago with Alan Watts when he tells you all these koans about this idea of overthinking or just doing the thing. And of course, I'm a musician, so like the idea of flow state. Even right now when I'm talking to y'all, thinking, I'm closing my eyes, kind of thinking about all these ideas, like tapping into flow state requires tapping into flow state. There's just no, can I tap into flow state? Or look at that person, they tap into flow state. No, you just tap into flow state. And sometimes you don't, sometimes you can't, and sometimes you can. And so the just do it idea is pretty true in a way. Like you just do it and stop worrying about whether you can do it or not do it. Because it takes energy and at tension, you know, we are at tension with things. Tension, torsion, strings. Yeah, little break here. I feel like I've touched on a lot of topics, a lot more to talk about. Again, let me know in the chat if there are any other ideas like wormhole, string theory, plasma, Birkeland currents, optics, any of these, and we'll continue the conversation in a minute. Fun show, 1:13 a.m., edge of space, looking at our gorgeous moon. I think let's do a wide shot here, and I haven't done that in a second. Also, new songs coming through soon. I've been updating all of them. This one is Lock It Right In. Memories of you, always gonna run in light, dawn, starlight, kind, moonlight, shine, or right side, or light tone, privilege ships in night's crown, fire like trees, chill like smoke, sign a hall, inside shell. Where are you? I've been here so long.
every life you come along, locking right in. Oh, every night it comes about, knocking right in. Oh, every life you come along, we'll fit right in. What you say to life completed? Don't you sound conceited? This song is soul is spiral. All I know is everything we just had a life completed. I know I sound conceited.
Link established. Mic off.
Light up that winter bread, black iron wants to be red. We sharp like waterfalls, so the words cut harder once. Side bombing, mom and dad, those times ain't coming back. Hard to know just how to feel, and could they ever know peace? Maybe I'll just cut them slack, but they work so hard to relax. And when they get their bodies to the sea, I feel the end becomes me. With the end come the solution. Smiles, not confusion. My heart, I release you to the memory of this place. Still that far song, an analog. And I feel like running back, gone too far this time. I'm glad we're analog.
Back in here for a bit. Let's see what's up to, let's see. Cosmic Confusion. Appreciate the comment. Welcome. Not sure if I've seen you in the chat before, but if you're new, welcome. Astralis, good to see you. Hey, hey. Om Namaste. And Morgan Ellis, nice to see you too. Welcome. Yeah, so the wide shot is extremely sharp on the 11 tonight. 63%, I believe. Is that right? 63.1 right now. And we got the Geminids right under the moon, so maybe we'll see a shooting star as well. You're right. Space debris. And yeah, I was talking about a bunch of stuff. Did y'all give me some things to talk about? Cosmic Confusion says, I've needed to hear the last 15 minutes or so of you talking my whole life. Thank you. I love that comment. Thank you. Silent Murmur says, yes, we just learn how to do the thing we want to do and attune to what works best in that sense. Well, I mean, it's easier said than done, right? Many people don't do that, but that's also their role in a way. What's so interesting about the Zen aspect of it is that even the people who don't recognize that they are God and that they are choosing to do what they do at every moment, they're still doing that, which is really funny. Or it's not funny in a mocking way, but funny just in the fact that it's almost like you could just beat somebody over the head with evidence and it still wouldn't matter. But I was thinking about how to approach this documentary of the theory of everything. And one funny way might be to do a video, like a series of video that's like 3 easy ways to tell that you're God. Want to know your God? Find out in 3 easy steps. First, look in the mirror. 2, recognize your God. 3, achieve nirvana. So real simple. If you just look at yourself, look at your body, there you go. I did actually start writing down some of these ideas. I really do want to talk about this, from all these orders of magnitude, the fractal recursion of nature, starting with the boundless field of consciousness, percolating into big bangs, or whatever they call a big bang, basically bubbling, percolating, and then the bubbling of universes, only some of them survive the same way we live right now. It's a game of numbers, and we're living in one of these universes, and therefore we can integrate something like the Big Bang, but add, we don't know beyond that. Beyond that there is this field. What is the field? And then we can get there and start asking that question. But then if you want to augment it, you realize that the self is the field. And so if you want to know what the field is, you want to know the self, or know thyself. So that's really an interesting path. We didn't really have that before with religion, because religion isolated people from the God idea by saying only this one person can be God, not you. You can be sort of like God, but not really the God. So there's a big difference. And it's the same thing they've done with quantum mechanics and relativity, is they're like, well, on the very small scales, things operate this way. And at the very large scales, they operate this way. And then at the human scale, it's very, very different. And interestingly, it's kind of what I mentioned about Michael Claridge's video and some of the Thunderbolts Project stuff, where even in Thunderbolts Project, where they're completely aware of electrical filaments, counter-rotating currents, they're also kind of a little bit limited in some of their understanding and presentation, because something like stellar metamorphosis exists. Jeffrey Walensky's been doing this for like 10 years, and the data is right there. And just even the concept of it, just even when you go from years of your life being told that planets are different than stars, 1, 2, planets form in accretion disks by clumping of matter, and 3, the spin of these planets and moons and stars, or planets and moons, we don't really know where the spin comes from, but it's left over from the formation of the galaxy. And then one more thing, which is the fact that our solar system is proposed to have started with the Sun, Jupiter, and then all the other planets. So all the planets are pretty much birthed from the same thing at the pretty much same time, and in the same place. And so and then you listen to something like stellar metamorphosis, which is like, hey, actually, there's a whole idea where stars actually turn into planets, and we're seeing all these different planets at different ages, same way we see people at different ages. And you're like, shit, I never even thought of it like that. But
Auto shutdown initiated.
What auto shutdown initiated? I don't know if y'all heard that, but my computer is just acting so weird. So damn weird. I hope my computer doesn't auto shut down, but let's see. No, please don't do that. Open Windows Update. No. Pause updates. Because that would really suck if it just decided to change. I don't think it will. Anyway, let me know if you heard that robot voice. You heard it, right? So stupid. I'm like, what the hell is that? So if it shuts down, you know that like the machines have taken over. I don't know if that auto shutdown is like my headset or the computer. Who knows? But either way, maybe it's just because the moon, maybe, see?
Auto shutdown cancelled. Mic on. Mic off.
Couldn't be a smooth show, right? I had to go a little crazy, a little glitchy. Okay, I think it's fine now. Let's see, Estrella says, I was talking about this all night, considering size and yeah, even in the obvious view of chain of rings or stellar metamorphosis, size, age, I'm not sure. Well, either way, like, I think we're on the same path here, but I think it's important to note that, first of all, the Thunderbolts Project doesn't really refer to stellar metamorphosis, so it's a pretty important distinction that Jeffrey is bringing in here. The fact that, like, mainstream cosmology and conspiracy theory and electric universe don't acknowledge this fact is pretty significant. And I think it's important to give Jeffrey his props because he really, like, it's such a huge piece of the puzzle. And now, I'll say it's important for me to say that, like, I've watched so many of his videos now, and I don't agree with absolutely everything. And I think one of the big ones is I just don't agree with the whole "there are definitely aliens" thing. And also, Jeffrey doesn't talk about consciousness and relating it back to the field and panpsychism and stuff like that. So it's not like just because I'm touting Jeffrey Walensky that I agree with everything he says. But in terms of planets and moons coming from stars, he is so right there, and you can feel it. It's palpable, and this is the type of thing that will ultimately either be completely co-opted by the mainstream, and they'll say they figured it out, or it might never hit because it's so profoundly different than what we have today that it might take 100 years before something like that is actually popularized. Is that the Siri bot? No, it's like I have these. You know what it really is, actually? I think I have a Corsair headset, and then I got a Corsair keyboard recently, or like yesterday, that had lights behind it because I can never see what I'm typing. And I don't think I love this keyboard, but either way, I had to download the software, and now it's a Corsair headset and a Corsair keyboard, and I think the software is actually talking to me at this point. So my keyboard and headphone setup has become sentient, and I guess this is my fate. Corsair Terminator. It is the Borg, right? Silent Murmur says something up at the top. Let's see. Air quality. It's amazing that we regenerate all our cells. We're miraculously alive. Well, is it a miracle, or is it this thing that is perfectly natural, right? I'm starting to understand. Yeah, I think, let me get back to where I was saying. So the universe percolates upwards from boundless intelligence into multiple big bangs. One of the big bangs, or the bubbles, becomes the universe that we're in right now. Everything is a fractal version of this percolation. This is what makes more sense, right? Integrating something like the Big Bang, integrating gravity as a byproduct of dielectric field or electromagnetism, integrating string theory as electrical sheaths and electrical currents, integrating field theory from quantum QED to quantum unified field up to cosmological scales, because it must work that way. Why wouldn't things be holistic? So I feel like Thunderbolts Project really needs to take a hard look at stellar metamorphosis. I really think that human biofield and where memories are stored, being in the extended mind in the field, is something that it's just nuts to me that it's not, like, if you look up where are memories stored, you'll find hundreds of videos, and not one of them even considers that it's actually in cloud storage around the body. Not one of them. I think maybe one of the guys is like, well, like the atomic structure, and then he quickly gets shut down. But this is what's going on. We have a field, the same way an atom has a field, the same way an Earth has a field, and the same way Jupiter and the Sun have fields. These fields contain the data, and the title of this video, Informed Biofield, or Informed Biofield, is we are a combination of field and plasma filament. Like the human body is this...
Auto shutdown
Oh,
initiated.
Jesus Christ.
Auto shutdown canceled. Mic on. Mic off.
I guess that's going on. So weird. So I've lost my train of thought yet again. But yeah, anyway, the connectivity of things. So bringing into focus, focus being really a paramount thing here, one of the main topics I was mentioning is this idea of why the human eye is emitting photons or emitting electricity, because we actually have an electrical coaxial Birkeland braided filament and its coaxial, and its sheath, the counter-rotating rings, outlining our eye. So that's why our eye looks the way it does. Our eye essentially is a black hole or a wormhole. And because we process information, we spit out information, and it's a cycle. So it's actually really interesting when you consider how the human body is actually an absolute fractal recursion of space and the quantum world. Gnostic Chef says, love how we are made up of the inorganic cell salts, the pineal sitting in the brain sand, and CSF being full of the same things. The computer wants to communicate with you. I think I mentioned this on one of the last shows, but I was having this discussion with my friend, the geologist, and we were talking about how I think, okay, this is actually cool because, like, you know how I talk about Rupert Sheldrake all the time. When you listen to Sheldrake, he does get to a point where he says that inanimate objects like tables and chairs are not sentient, are not part of panpsychism. But I really think like he gets trapped there because of habit, because of not wanting to go any deeper on it, maybe, who knows. But in that particular case, I actually disagree, I think, pretty much with everybody here. But panpsychism means everything is. So everything we see, including tables and chairs and rocks, are light, are vibrational oscillatory light coming from a boundless field of consciousness. Therefore, even tables and chairs are natural light organization, right? They're not something different than the essence of what we are. And this is the same reason when I was watching Michael Claridge's recent video about, he shows a chart of orders of magnitude where this is one part of our universe that I agree with, or sorry, one part of the mainstream fundamental understanding that I agree with, which is orders of magnitude, where they have 10 to the power 1 through 10 to the power whatever, orders of magnitude. I think it's obvious that our universe is an order of magnitude universe. Just because things organize differently at different scales doesn't make them different stuff. So in that case, like, it's kind of conflating it. But I think at the essence of it, this boundless intelligence resonance creates tables, also makes humans. Humans make tables, but does that make it different? Like, are we not the field making a table? Just because we're humans also perceiving tables doesn't make it any different than humans being electrical signatures, creating finer and finer electrical signatures as a table. That's one thing. So it's the field creating essences of the field, therefore the field itself is conscious, and therefore the table is also has a form of consciousness. Also, when you knock on a table, it responds. And finally, all objects, as soon as they're created, are loaded with bacteria and loaded with ionizations and loaded with elements and dust and dirt. No object in the universe, 0 objects, are actually free of life. Plain and simple. At some point, there's resonance. And there I can say, like, where I love Rupert Sheldrake, but I disagree with him. I love Jeff Walensky, but I don't agree they're aliens. I like Thunderbolts Project very much, but I disagree that planets birth stars, or planets birth moons or comets. Stars are born along strings by crossing of wire, twisting of Birkeland currents and filaments. These twisted filaments create sparks. These twisted knots, these Z-pinches, are what we see as things, thinking. And you can imagine these points are a heart, a planet, a thought, an instance.
Auto shutdown initiated.
Here we go again.
Auto shutdown cancelled. Mic on. Mic off.
What is this, the Artemis missions? Oh, we're a go for the moon missions. Oh, canceled. Yeah, my computer has a demon. I have no idea what's going on, y'all. I think, like I said, I updated the software, and now it wants me to use the headphones as a microphone, but I'm using my other microphone as the microphone. What other things can we talk about? Let's talk about the moon. The moon surface, I've talked about a million times, being potentially electric arcing versus impact theory. See a ton of comments about this, and almost nobody comes to this channel and says, oh yeah, this is what you've been saying. Again, not an ego trip, but more so like it's so obvious that we have these hexagons and that we have these crazy features on the moon, and there should be a debate or a discussion about like how they were formed. This idea of late heavy bombardment creating everything that we see on the moon, and the moon being created from an accretion disk, is just this very insane, is like much more of an insane idea than the moon was the core of a star. It's just that simple. And Phil Plait and the other two kind of weird guys on YouTube, they're like so hell-bent on keeping the status quo and not even considering the advancing of science or feeling empowered themselves. Like, I see, basically, like, YouTube is so lame, but that's not true, actually. I don't want to say that. YouTube is pretty good for what it is. It's lame in a lot of ways, but it's great in other ways. The way it's lame in this particular way is that it serves me up these videos of the people that I'm talking, that uphold the status quo, and they got hundreds of thousands of views. They won't even let themselves enjoy the progress of science. Does that make sense? They're so hell-bent on saying Pierre-Marie Robitaille is a crackpot, and he really has no business doing science, instead of like listening and trying to process data. Immediately want to shut down new ideas and thoughts, or any number of things. I even saw a video, like Jeffrey Walensky has 752 subscribers today. Please go make them more and share his channel. But he has 752 subscribers, and there's literally a channel that's like, stellar metamorphosis is the biggest bunch of bullshit I've ever seen. It's literally a whole video dedicated to talking about how stellar metamorphosis is crazy. And I'm like, have you listened to any of his videos? This guy's like, first of all, he's a nice guy. Second, very smart and really well researched, and is proposing something magnificent and amazing. And there's literally a whole video dedicated to taking him down. It's crazy. So, trying to do the opposite here, trying to uplift him a little bit. And let's see, what else? Yeah, so a lot of things this week. Feel very empowered. And you can tell when I've really done my research that I can talk about things much more clearly and much more thoroughly. And it's really important to do that. Like when you feel like you don't have the answer to something, or you feel insecure about talking about it, it's likely you haven't looked and dug deep enough to figure out what it is that you want to talk about. Other things, I guess Artemis mission and going to the moon, or did we go to the moon, and what happened with that. And there's a whole kind of thing going on. A friend of mine wanted to look at the Apollo press conference with me, and I dug that up, and that was a whole interesting deep dive. I know a lot of you have probably seen it, but seeing the pre-Apollo mission press conference and then post-Apollo returning to Earth press conference, it's really weird. A lot of people think it's very fake, but there's something going on there. It's just not normal. Whatever it is, any excuse in the book, these guys are acting a little bit or very funny at this press conference. But what did I find? I found some International Space Agency panels with people from different nations, so Chinese scientists and Spanish scientists and NASA guys and Lockheed Martin and Northrop Grumman and other different types of and ESA and ESA. So well,
Auto shutdown initiated.
let's try that again.
Auto shutdown canceled. Mic on, mic off.
Mic on, mic off. So they had these panels about like mining the moon. And so some of the mining the moon, landing on the moon, the setup for the next 10 years, the batteries they were going to use, the trucks, where they were going to land, the spacecraft, lots of stuff like that, you know, like planning the next 10 years. And there was an interesting Chinese scientist who actually really talked about what I wanted to talk about, where he's like, well, why does everyone need to go to Mars? Why can't we just do the moon thing first? And everybody's looking at him like he's crazy. But that's the real obvious thing here. Like, why is every single space discussion or video immediately they're like, we're doing the moon thing, but quickly we're definitely going to Mars right afterwards? And people are like, wait, I never asked for that. Nobody really cares about that. Like, most people, I think, are way more interested in going to the moon than going to Mars, except for the dogmatic gatekeeping kind of cabal of evangelical mainstream cosmologists. But was that too far? I mean, they might know, they might not know. But mic on, mic off. Let's see. Silent Murmur says, I think they do try to comprehensively listen to Dr. Robitaille to their best avail, but they just lack the capacity, so they feel threatened. Well, look, it's true. Like, to be perfectly honest, Sky Scholar is the only channel, one of the few. I mean, there are a couple of others, but now, even when I listen to him now, I'm like, man, like, this is like a little bit over my head, or a lot over my head. But the main thing here is that, look, he might not be right about the sun. It's important, like the condensed matter or the sun having a surface, the way Jeffries talks about it, like he might not be 100% right that all suns have a surface, one, and two, that this liquid metallic hydrogen convection on the surface of the sun, this lattice, is a real surface. So there's a whole debate that can happen there. So I want to make sure that I don't say just Pierre-Marie Robitaille, he's 100% right about everything. But he's brilliant. There's no doubt about it. And he's an inventor, and he's very kind. And what he's saying is very logical in terms of Kirchhoff's law, black body radiation, in terms of tainting of data from the cosmic microwave background radiation. There's no denying what he's saying about the fact that you can't extract signal from noise. You just can't do this. And they do this constantly, where they push the data in certain ways to fit models, and then they say, look, we proved it. And people don't like when you call their bluff, pretty much. However, I will say, like, somebody like Pierre-Marie Robitaille, I feel like it would be so interesting to hear his take on panpsychism or Birkeland currents feeding into plasma, like feeding the sun from the outside. I think he doesn't really talk about it. Like, I've watched, I think, all his videos, and he doesn't really talk about wires connecting things. So I think it's important that as somebody who espouses all this information, that I take a very critical eye to all of it, no matter who I recommend. You know, there's always something in there that kind of hits a little bit funny. And so just to quickly talk about Jeffrey Walensky and aliens, so there's a video where he very much believes that the alien footage that we see, and many people do, I know a lot of y'all do too, but when I see footage from UFO stuff, especially footage that I've captured, I tend to think that it's stuff that humans can make. And I just don't see why it's more logical that it's a civilization from beyond, from a different star system, from Alpha Centauri or from Alpha Centauri or Orion or Arcturians, why that's more logical and reasonable that aliens are flying around on Earth versus the fact that Tesla and Maxwell and Charles Proteus Steinmetz and Ken Wheeler and Eric Dollard, and we have tons of people, plasma physicists, Dan Winter, who absolutely outline how antigravitic works, how antigravitic is an old idea, basically just field aligning currents or non-field aligned currents. And
Auto shutdown initiated. Auto shutdown canceled. Mic on, mic off.
I'll try and fix this for next time. But yeah, so antigravitic is human-made tech. We've had it for over 100 years, maybe 60, 80 years. And but Jeff Walensky, who I really like, also has this video where he's like, UFOs are flying around and they make these turns, and there's this whole description of what UFOs or UAPs do. And I just don't see how it's more reasonable to think that it's aliens as opposed to human-made technology. Even if it is aliens, you know what I'm saying? But the more rational take here for me is the fact that it's human stuff. All of it, from top to bottom. So I can't really agree that it's just aliens because it seems like it's aliens. It seems more like it keeps everybody on their toes if no one admits to it. If no one takes responsibility, it's like, well, maybe they're aliens. I'm not saying it's aliens. All right, go back to this moon here. I know I said some Mars, but I've missed Mars at this point. Escaped. So tomorrow night maybe, or the night after, we'll do a bit of Mars. Thankfully, the connection's been pretty stable, besides the sentient AI trying to shut down and shut off. What's happening, chat room? Let me know how you're feeling. Let's see, Estrella says, not one science video, but that's just your point. Non-secular study and sharing is very important. Well, I think also coming to solutions, coming to conclusions, baking the cake is also important. Like, for example, like Dissident Science or Demystifying Science podcast, or even See the Pattern, Gareth's stuff, who really has done a lot of great work, tends to not come to conclusions in his videos. It's always, is this thing? Could this thing be this thing? And mainstream does the same sort of thing. They're like, maybe in 10 years it'll help us define this one thing that it might help us do in 10 years. And you're like, wait, what? Ellie Wynn, you're sleepy. I know, if whoever's sleepy, take off, enjoy your night. I know I'm going to keep going here for a little bit longer just to get this off my chest, because I've been really compounding it for a few nights now. Just trying to tell people, I like wormholes are real. What's up, more Jello? Nice to see ya. Yes, practice. Stop talking about it. Let's do it. At least some, right? So like people will argue. They'll say, how are you going to come up with the answer? Who are you to come up with an answer? And all I'm saying is let's at least get to answers that are there. You can, at some point, you have to bake the cake. And some point, the cake has that set of ingredients, and you just got to go for it. And so if somebody like me, who's, again, a college dropout pretty much, and a self-taught person, is like putting together stellar metamorphosis, human biofield, panpsychism, electric universe, connected universe, Alan Watts' Vedic, Hindu, Buddhist intelligence, and the ancient texts, and then you add and sprinkle in all the stuff from the mainstream bucket, and then you realize, okay, we live in a world where like the systems don't tell you things. In fact, they tell you pretty much the wrong things most of the time. Here we are with a very multidimensional but very comprehensive approach to the world. And so for me, at least, 10 years ago when I first discovered suspicious observers and electric universe and stopped thinking about ufology as the only thing, I really didn't know anything about what I know today. Even this week, this idea of looking at string theory and optics and looking at the storms on Jupiter and really grasping what they are is incredibly powerful. And I didn't need really to get it peer reviewed, and I didn't need a teacher telling me, I didn't need a degree to do it. I just know it now. Ellie Win, enjoy your warm. No matter what way you say it, it's kind of gross, but kind of funny.
Auto shutdown initiated.
Jesus, AI, enough.
Auto shutdown cancelled. Mic on. Mic off.
Mic on, mic off. Yeah, you have a great night, Ellie. I'll see you on the next one for sure. I hope the kitties are doing good. Astralis says, aliens is an awful broad words, but I agree with what you're saying now, even though you know I'm an alien. I think, look, if we're talking about it, we are on a planet. If somebody were looking at us from another planet, they'd be like aliens, right? So in the sense, the grander sense, we're all extraterrestrial because we're not of this earth. We are star stuff in a way. But I'm just talking about Greys, Arcturians, Hermes, holographic, jump gates, the stuff that the ufology community, and the reason I'll tell you this is because go look at Stephen Greer and go look at David Wilcock, and they know a lot about this energy stuff, and yet they use their platforms to continue to kind of hype things up. Just wait till there's disclosure. There's technology I can't tell you about. It's super scary technology. That type of kind of fanciful, hocus pocus, spooky, drumming up, hyperbolic vibe is now a litmus test for me when I know people are full of shit. And I don't think Stephen Greer is full of shit. I just think, I don't know, I think it makes him money to keep it a little bit confusing. Or, I don't dislike the guy. He's like a surgeon, and he had cancer, and he saved his wife, and like, he's kind of an interesting guy, but this idea that, oh, it's so scary, I can't tell you about it, doesn't resonate well with me. Similarly, like when I listen to Nassim Haramein, who knows about this stuff too, talks about the apple, talks about the field, the whole Thrive thing. Why they don't engage Electric Universe is just beyond me. Why they don't engage somebody like Robitaille or Stephen Crothers or Stellar Metamorphosis. There's just this weird boundary layers between even alternative ideas. And then also you listen to Nassim Haramein, and he makes it also extremely complicated for people. I'm like, you're talking about something that you should be able to tell a kid or just a regular person, and they'll get it. So, night, Ellie. I'll catch you soon. Thank you. No, it's me, more Jello. I updated my Corsair software, and now it's talking to me for some reason. I'm trying to shut down my headphones because the battery sucks. So I keep trying to turn it on, just abort shutdown. So at any moment now it's going to try and cut me off again. Astrala says, I agree, disclosure old, and I hate people taking advantage. Yeah, it's like the term that I coined, I feel like, is salvationism, right? It's like aliens will come and explain where humans are from. Right? And I think that is much more easily answered when you look at your body and you're like, oh, I made my own body. And nature is self-organizing because it's conscious. Way more logical than aliens made us. Then aliens gave us technology. Well, actually, we live in a vibrational oscillatory world where humans are very, very smart, and humans can easily make alien-level technology. Or at least test it. We can talk about like time travel or teleportation, but these things become conceivable when you approach field theory. But definitely without field theory, things like teleportation, telepathy become pure magic, and that's why most people don't know to really talk about it. What's the other thing? Lost my train a little bit. But yeah, disclosure. Again, yeah, so they take advantage of people by giving them this salvationism, this idea that aliens will come save you, or aliens will come down to Earth and stir up the pot, or they'll, like, one of the things that bothers me a lot I don't know why it does, but it's just this. So I've talked about Dan Winter. Dan Winter is super cool, but he sits and talks to this woman named Elena Denan, who's also pretty cool in her own right. But the stuff that she tells people, like the Galactic Federation / Confederation, and they're always confusing the two, but Galactic Federation basically got rid of all the Greys and the Reptilians. This is this line that it's hard to go into this, but it's one of my little pet peeves. But not just her, but a lot
Auto shutdown initiated.
Okay.
Auto shutdown canceled. Mic on. Mic off.
Galactic Emissary canceled. So they talk about this idea that they got rid of the Greys and the Reptilians. But it's like saying we got rid of all war and we got rid of all racism. There's just no way the galaxy, first of all, our galaxy is too big. Second, you could literally hide in plain sight at that level of technology. And third, there's just no way to find all the reptilians and all the Greys and so-called get rid of them. So when somebody like that has a YouTube show and says, listen, I've talked to the aliens, I've directly, none of you can talk to them or see them. You just have to believe me. Just trust me, bro. But not only did I talk to them, but they also got rid of all the aliens and the Dracos. And I'm like, and Dan Winter, who's a brilliant guy, I mean, absolute genius guy, right, is sitting there nodding along. He's like, yup, we got rid of the Dracos. And I'm like, he's like, they're all really, the ufology community, they're all actually really smart, like Credo Mutwa and some of these cats. What's his name? Is it Michael Cramo? There are a couple of these cats who are just like, again, I hate to talk about people's characters because, of course, people could say my character is off the wall, but it doesn't really matter. It just matters that, like, really high-level information is right there. This is the big secret. The big secret is the answer is right in front of you, but you have to accept it and realize the answer. That's the big secret of all of it, of science, and so this idea that only some people get on board with Hermes, and those are some of these people are the emissaries, and they come back and they tell you that we got to get rid of the Greys and the Dracos, and I'm like, what are they trying to accomplish here? Like, I just don't. I mean, besides having a YouTube channel, but it just makes no sense. Like there's absolutely no way to prove it, and it also provides false hope. Because, of course, even if you could get rid of Dracos and Greys, how many could you? Who are they? Like, it's this very broad brushstroke of salvationism that just just really taints a lot of of that whole kind of rabbit hole. But what bugs me even more is Dan Winter, who implosion theory, neg entropy, vortexial math, the guy's like onto it, flame in mind, like almost everything he talks about, right on point, talking about it for years. Then he believes this sort of stuff where like emissaries are coming and telling us that the galaxy's the Federation is just waiting for Earth to get out of its teenage state. We're a quarantined planet who's just not mature enough to... Give me a fucking break. Give me a fucking goddamn break. Like... Okay, I just don't know what to say to that. It's just so funny. But those types of things are the litmus tests for me when it comes to science. Mastership is open. You go to a master chef and you're not going to be able to cook a coq au vin or make crepes right out the gate, but doesn't mean like the master chef won't tell you how to do it. And John McLaughlin and Rick Beato and master musicians, they'll tell you all the theory. They'll tell you, here's the dominant seventh, and here's the modal interplay, modal, whatever. Here's like 15 modes and ways to write a symphony. You're not going to do it immediately, right? You need to practice and practice a million times over, and you might not get there. But mastership from true masters is not hidden. It's right there for the taking. And pretty much the same thing exists with space stuff. Like the mastership, Sky Scholar, Jeffrey Walensky, Eileen McCusick, those masters are telling you straight up what the answers to the universe are, and it's up to the person listening as to whether they want to feel empowered. and recognize that it's right in front of them. They can keep going forever. You keep saying, well, in 10 years we might find that blah, blah, blah to maybe be able to tell the one thing about this one thing. Or you could choose to say, no, I'm recognizing it right now. Astrala says, yep, the llamas and the masters too. Look at it, like we have the texts. If you listen to pretty much all of them, they'll tell you straight up exactly what the answer is. It's always up to the student or the seeker to say, oh, I was looking for this all along. And it was
Auto shutdown initiated. Auto shutdown canceled. Mic on. Yeah. Mic off.
Yeah, it's right there for the taking. Same, like I said, science too. People think science is hidden, but it's just in a forest of a ton of information, and it's actually quite difficult to find the slices of what's right in science. Silent Murmur says, this machine sounds insistent, passive-aggressive, like it will need psychotherapy to resolve this thing about why Chris is using a mic external to its program. I love this headset. It's so stupid.
Mic on.
Oh no. Oh no.
Mic off.
Mic off. Okay. But it shouldn't really be talking. I never asked it to talk. Never wanted to have a conversation with my headset. It's going to be like, hey, can you introduce me to your other computer? To your AirPods Max? They look pretty hot. All right, so lots of information tonight. I hope y'all share this video with people that you like, and I definitely want to hear everybody's opinion on what I mentioned tonight, especially when it comes to, I know that people don't like Einstein much anymore, but I think it's important to take the stuff that he was referring to and actually tie it into electric universe. There's just no way we're going to get rid of the cult of Einstein without embracing Einstein as well. And the same thing is going to go down for like the moon missions, and it's going to be a little bit of something that we have to evolve and metamorphose, you know, and take 200-year-old science and bring it into the future, with or without the help of academia. It's just that simple. It's like I exist. No, we'll see. I have some words for this headset later. So let me know what y'all are thinking. Let's play a song here. I know it's been short on the music, but I'll play y'all one of the new ones. And what I will do is I'm going to turn these headphones off.
Powering off.
There we go. It doesn't change the microphone situation. So I'm going into some desert fires here, y'all. 2:03 a.m., still with our moon, our gorgeous moon. Let me zoom back in up to Mare Imbrium up at the top. Mare Frigoris is looking good. So, and if you have any requests, I'll do that. Maybe going for another 15 minutes here.
Some lacking out, what mystery or love? In between the record, I found light had turned to dust. Rockets on the beach, oh, we knew just when to leave. I believe what's told, our story carries out. One breath so inspiring. Oh, it's nothing like it thought it though. One day there's nothing left to prove. All this love we find, all we need to face with you. Long enough, but I'm gonna lose my mind. Cleared out the evidence, uncover the shock this time. Lightning is fire. Say you to the love force my home for 7 miles. We trail along for 7 lives. Let the whole heart say, we're coming to shop this time. The light doesn't fire. Say you love him for so long. Like there's a fire. Like there's a fire.
Just hopping in here, say much love to Copper Trops and NGC, lovely to see you. Loverly to see you both. Very interesting show tonight, if I may say. I got a lot off my chest, a lot of different connections to be made, a lot of topics covered. For now, it's dance time. It is. Let me keep going here with the tunes. I want to upload a new version of Not So Far. I'll play that, but let me do something while I do that. How about Circuit Breaker for a second? Back in here, got this new version of Not So Far uploaded, right? Did it? There we go. So before I play that, I got a zoomed in shot here of Mare Imbrium. We got the Apennine mountain range all the way across on the right. On the left, we got Plato, Sinus Iridum. We got Archimedes, Aristillus, and Autolycus in the middle. I think it's already starting to hit the top of my windowsill, so that's why it's already blurring. But either way, still a great little zoomed in shot, and then we'll move down a little bit, take a look at what's left. There's definitely some Clavius and Tycho. I think Ptolemaeus as well. Nice little hexagonal formations, chains over here. So I think I didn't talk about looking at electron microscope photos of atoms. And if you look up really the very smallest photos that have ever been taken, all you really see is hexagonal latticing. And so this is so important when it comes to looking at geology, because really the whole fractal recursion part of it, the fact that things express themselves, the universe expresses itself, or we express ourselves as the same shape over and over and over and over again with slight variations. And so at the very smallest level of our reality, things are shaped like nested hexagons, and our field is nested hexagons, and the surface of the moon happens to be the same sort of thing. Looking at Clavius over here with this really cool chain of craters in the middle. Again, easily could have been an electric arc persisting as a connection between the moon and Earth, creating a melting plasma bubble that left this imprint. Just as plausible as a massive meteoric impact epoch. And to recap some of the things tonight, again, the idea of strings being electrical filaments, plasma microtubules being wormholes, also being sheaths of Birkeland currents, so the counter-rotating sheaths or the tubes that are around an electrical filament called Birkeland currents. These tubes get pinched at z-pinches or plasma points or chakras or stars or instantiations of consciousness. The pinch creates a pinched tube. This tube is a hypotrochoid or an hourglass or a counter space of a donut. It's also a wormhole. It's also the structure of a human system. And the mouths of a wormhole are a black hole and a white hole. And therefore black holes become real in a sense, but not really objects. In fact, just the rings of the openings of a Birkeland current sheath. So the mouth of the plasma tube on one end is a black hole, on the other end a white hole. And so humans are that, so are creatures, so are dipoles, atoms, atomic structures. And the way interaction happens is nucleus and shell, or human and biofield, planet and magnetofield, sun and solar heliosphere, universe and galactic arms. Tying in redshift being a measure of age rather than distance, is just a pretty big little piece of it. A big little piece. What else do we have? The storms on Jupiter and storms in general, the spiral coming from the twisted Birkeland filament or the Birkeland current or the electrical filament, the same reason that pee comes out of our bodies as a spiral, or water comes out of a faucet as a spiral, or bullet spirals with the Coriolis effect, or tornadoes exist, hurricanes exist, spirals in nature, twist because there's actually a twisting filament, coaxial braided electrical current going through its electromagnetic center. And that's why we have these systems in nature, and therefore the storms on Jupiter and Saturn, Neptune, Uranus, and Earth. All the aurora are basically outlines of the Birkeland filament or Birkeland current, the counter-rotating sheath around an electrical current that is powering every object, humans, Earths, planets, atoms. What's happened in Fantasy Ecstasy? I see you, bro. Nice to see you. Hope all is well. Just doing a little bit of a recap of all the info tonight. If any of y'all are showing up here feeling like you missed out, I feel like you did. I talked about a lot of different things tonight, definitely some new stuff. Like I just mentioned about wormholes and string theory and white holes, black holes. I'm telling you, like I found some of the data, but there's not a lot of it out there, so this connection is pretty huge, I think. Just understanding, like, it's in a way kind of proving that there are wormholes, which right now are kind of theoretical. And then it also gives validation to microtubules, which do exist. But it also explains that these wormholes and microtubules are also Birkeland sheaths or pinched plasma tubes. And it's not just on the quantum scale or on the cosmological scale. It happens at every scale because every filament connected in the universe is surrounded by a pinched plasma tube. It's extremely ubiquitous. So yeah, storms on Jupiter are explained, auroras explained, powered from the outside explained, stellar metamorphosis, stars. I looked into cores of Neptune, Uranus, the storms on Neptune and Uranus, electrical fields of Neptune, Uranus, Saturn, and Jupiter. Look for yourselves. Put Jupiter left, Saturn next, Neptune, Uranus, Neptune, Earth, and the Moon, and then Mars, Venus, and Mercury. And then look at them, and you can really just see this amazing timeline of metamorphosis of a star's core going from a brown dwarf situation, or even just our sun, turning into a Jupiter, turning into a Saturn, turning into a Uranus, Neptune, an Earth, a Moon, Mercury. It's beautifully holistic. It makes so much more sense than clumping of matter. It makes so much more sense that we're looking at an age range of planets and stars, really. And it also means that our moon is a dead core of a star, which explains a lot more than thinking it's just this object that came out of an accretion, protoplanetary accretion disk, that it was formed at the same time as Earth, and that it was subject to heavy bombardment, and we ended up with the moon that we have today, which is just so much more ridiculous than the fact that the moon may have been the core of a star, that Earth as a star captured the moon, or maybe was a binary star system with the moon, and that the moon's surface is a combination of volcanism, electric arcing, and maybe small impacts over the years. But mostly ablation, really the wearing away of the surface of the moon. And interestingly, something I'll bring up here, which is the fact that the surface of the moon, the way Jeffrey explains it, is maybe like this regolith that we see is the surface, like the continental plates, and also the core kind of meeting an equilibrium. So we're really seeing the planetary core / star core and some of the remnants of the plates on top of it. So maybe the moon really imagine what Earth would look like if everything were stripped off of it and it got withered and whittled and ablated down to a point where it may look like the moon. It makes a lot more sense. NGC says, do I think Mars is older than Earth? So it's interesting. I was looking at Jeffrey's stuff trying to figure out what he thinks about, other planets and Mars. It feels like maybe Mars was about to reach Earth-like status and then got stripped apart, right? Like this idea, stellar metamorphosis, doesn't preclude Saturn being a brown dwarf, right? It does, Kronos, this idea of Velikovsky's stuff, they say Saturn was larger and then exploded. So if Saturn were like Jupiter and lost a huge layer of atmosphere, and we saw more of Saturn and that created its rings, this is in line with electric universe historical thinking. Now Mars, was it a sister planet to Earth in the brown dwarf sheath of Saturn, like is postulated, or is it something that evolved elsewhere? And so I'm not 100% sure in terms of the aging of things NGC. To be honest, I'm still kind of trying to figure out where Jeffrey places all this stuff, and a lot of it does make more sense now that I listen to it, where he's like, the Earth must be way, way older than the Sun and Jupiter. So that I can agree with. I think it's hard to tell where Mars exactly fits or where Venus exactly fits, because they're close to Earth, but they're also completely decimated. But they're not calcified and rocky like the Moon or Mercury. So I'm not 100% sure. I feel like Luna is more dead than Mars, though, no? Like Mars still, because of, I mean, really simply because of the color, there's a lot more ferric dust left on Mars, and there's definitely more of an atmosphere than the Moon. Our Moon is really, at this point, heavy metals, exotic gases, right? The Moon is basically a decaying body with a very, very small magnetic field. Mars has a much more powerful magnetic field, more gravity. As far as I know, like the stuff that we know from Mars and from backyard astronomy is tough to really gauge, right? We don't know very much about it. But if you take standard cosmology about Mars, it seems like Mars is a bit more like lively than our Moon. Even Venus, right? Venus is still pretty active. So like stellar metamorphosis, I like the idea because it allows things to almost become Earths, but then if they were on the wrong trajectory, they don't make it. So that makes some sense to me. Yo, Frederick, what's happening? Hope all is well. Yep, all chill tonight. Just feeling good because I finally got all this information out of my field and into yours. Please go back and check the video from the top because I talk about a ton of different things, but I really feel like this connection between wormholes and Birkeland sheaths or plasma sheaths is extremely important. Let's see. NGC says, yeah, Luna is older, but I don't think Mars was ever Earth-like. No, I don't. I don't know either. I definitely know that this idea of ice being remnant at the very end because things cool off. Think for yourself, the heliosexual model. I don't know what you're talking about, but funny. What can I say? Oh, wormholes. Well, I was trying to explain a little bit more in detail, but I tend to take alternative science, but then I also take mainstream ideas and kind of explain them through the understanding of the connected universe. So what I did this week is I was looking up a lot of different ideas, and one of the things that I came across is microtubules in quantum entanglement and quantum dynamics, mostly due to the fact that a Nobel Prize was just awarded for quantum entanglement. So I was looking up microtubules, made me think of the idea that maybe wormholes, even though they're still theoretical to some degree, are actually just cosmological scale versions of microtubules, which in turn are also really the plasma sheaths around a Birkeland filament. So that's why I was mentioning wormholes. It makes a lot more sense than we have no idea and we'll never know. Let's see. NGC says each planet does its own thing and it's in its own location in the universe. So I think like the solar system operates I'll tell you what I was thinking, because Jeffrey was talking about how potentially stars move and kick stars out of a system. So like what would happen like with Uranus or Neptune? Would our sun kind of go nova? Would Jupiter explode and turn into a Saturn? Things could happen in our solar system that would push out planets and recapture planets or recapture moons or comets. So things in stellar metamorphosis and electric universe are pretty volatile in space and move around, and things could change over time. So it makes me think that like our current solar system is a little bit like a village or like a band, where these group of stars and their little star systems have all come together in this configuration now. And that's why, but Jupiter is like a little solar system, right? It has like 76 moons, 4 or 5 which you can see, Amalthea you can barely see, but 4 moons that you can see. And it's an exotic, evolving, advanced version of our sun. And then Saturn has like 70 moons as well, or more. And it has its own moons that you can see and its own bands, and smaller than Jupiter. It spins slower and it's more complex. And then Neptune and Uranus have their own little solar system, and they're more complex, but they're colder, they spin slower, they're more evolved. And on you go through this stellar metamorphosis chart, and things just start to fit into place. Let's see. Am I in the Carl Sagan camp? Please elaborate either way. Well, as somebody who grew up in an era where my parents loved somebody like Carl Sagan, I tended to think that he was very pompous, but also that he was right. So I thought it's a little bit like how people, or even how I felt about Neil deGrasse Tyson or Michio Kaku when I was coming up, when I was a teenager or in my early 20s. I thought, oh God, man, these guys are so smart. Of course, that's why they have the positions they do. And they just dumb it down for the rest of us so we can regurgitate it. But then when you really look into it a bit further, you realize these guys are really more celebrities and not, I don't want to say actors, but they know a little bit about what they're talking about. But their main thing is to pretend they know a lot about what they're talking about. And what they tell you is they keep you kind of coming back for more. They're like a drug dealer or like the church. So every Sunday, Neil deGrasse Tyson tells you a little bit about the universe and kind of sucks you back to get, that's kind of gross, but it kind of suckers you back for more later. He's like, well, we can't know, and the Big Bang happened here and here and here and here, and also you're an idiot, but also like you need to discover. And I think that's not science, that's hype, and hype exists in almost every field, but when you want to come down to it and you really want to think about science, this is not science, what they're doing in celebrity, mainstream, expositional dumps. Pretty much because every article reads the same. Every article is extremely convoluted. They don't really give you substantive, final conclusion answers. It's a lot of speculation. I'll give you an example, like protein folding. Is something I've talked about. Most people have never heard of it, but 40, 50 years of protein folding has yielded no actual results except for simulation models of protein folding. And yet there's funding and people studying it, and there are things that people study and do math and do theories on that really don't affect any type of actual human cause at all. And therefore, we're living in a reality that we have imaginary science and money funding, and then we have people who are really interested in what the universe is, and I think some of us are here. So anyway, Carl Sagan. I think Carl Sagan was wrong, ultimately. Not only was he wrong, but he actually turned out to be a villain. I think one of the most villainous things he did was to denounce Velikovsky on public television by saying flat out, he's like, it's pretty, some people can just be wrong. Velikovsky, da-da-da-da-da. And I'm like, really, Carl Sagan? Really? But not just that. He wrote books to denounce Velikovsky. He also was so smug, and he really didn't know the answers to everything. Nobody really did at the time. When you look at Alan Watts versus Carl Sagan, Alan Watts, it's almost an insult to put them side by side, but if you want somebody who sounded very pompous and erudite but actually knew what they were talking about, listen to Alan Watts. So Carl Sagan kind of has been burned in my book, sadly. Or Rupert Sheldrake. Professor Rupert. I'm just getting the camera here. So the moon about to disappear under the windowsill. Persona non grata. Think for yourself says moderns say science is not science at all, modern day. Yeah, that's what I said. I think I agree with that. But I also don't think that all contemporary science ideas are fake. I think a lot of them are real. Any of the big lies need a lot of truth. Oops. So usually a big lie is like a lot of truth and then one little lie. Are we talking empirical or are we talking philosophy? Well, that's not true. I think natural philosophy can be tied into science, because if you take consciousness and existence out of science, you're missing like a huge part of science. Because the self, the human body, and every organism is self-assembling, self-conscious, self-aware, panpsychic, and emerges as a phenomenon of consciousness and emerges on an earth that was ready to people, as like an apple tree, apples. And so Alan Watts not only covered the philosophical side, but he also talked about the fundamental physics side through Vedic language, and actually very much explains space, counter space, quantum dynamics, and really science in the most beautiful way by tying it to the self and revelation and self-realization, actualization. So Carl Sagan, I think, absolutely trying to sort of be that, but when you really listen to Sagan and really read his stuff, and then you know some of the stuff that I'm talking about, he sounds like he doesn't know what he's saying. It's to quote Donald Scott, it's purple prose. Purple prose. Fluffy language. Like, again, think about some of these ideas, like even what Think for Yourself is saying. We've been indoctrinated and ingrained to say philosophy is not science. Like, I'm not even trying to, I'm not trying to nitpick. I'm just saying we're so used to that. If it's not peer reviewed, I'm not looking at it. Did you get it? Or you get on or people who say to Pierre-Marie Robitaille, like, this is very interesting, but did you go on Joe Rogan? Like, as if somehow if he goes on Joe Rogan, that validates it more. I think it validates it less. Like, Joe Rogan is not a level of intellectualism. You know what I'm saying? Like, people think they are, like Jordan Peterson. Jordan Peterson is not the level of intellectualism that I strive for. People like this who talk down to people are not masters. Mastership comes with clarity and humility. The higher up the chain you are of mastership, the more humble you are and the kinder you are, and the less information you withhold. It's just a part of the natural process. So when you have gatekeeping podcasters like Lex Friedman and Joe Rogan, these cats are cherry picking what they want to hear, what they want to talk about, and they're imposed upon reality en masse. Like, I'm proud to say that I've never listened to any of them, like, as a full show. Like, why would I spend any time listening to people who will not look past their own nose and keep regurgitating ideas of the past? So I definitely feel like people like Sagan and deGrasse Tyson, like Neil deGrasse Tyson's almost pathetic at this point, but like, you can't blame him for wanting to make a living doing this and evangelizing it, but does he have any fun? Like, none of these cats seem like they have any fun discovering anything new. Or think about it, if Neil deGrasse Tyson discovered Electric Universe, or he knows about it, and yet he can't ever talk about it because he's paid to never talk about it, think about how terrible that would be as a person. It's a little bit like knowing these secrets is not all that great. Silent Murmur says Jordan Peterson doesn't talk down to people. He's humble. We can just disagree on that. We don't have to get down into ups and downs of Jordan Peterson, but it's more so that he's upheld as a measure of intellectualism, and he's upheld as a measure of, if somebody talks to him, therefore that person is validated. That's more what I mean. I don't think he inherently is a bad person, or he's not in his right to say whatever he wants. I don't care what he says. I just think that I don't like holding up yardstick people, especially people who are so kind of stuck in their own ways that there's no approaching people like that. At least I don't feel like that. Let's see. Think for Yourself says, I find the topic of laws and legalese very fascinating as well. Black's law and jurisprudence. I think that's very interesting too. I don't know a lot about it though, but I imagine that it is. Silence says, passion for a subject can be confused with talking down to someone about the subject. It's just more that there's not a passage or a quote that I've read from JRE or Jordan Peterson or Lex Friedman that doesn't rub me the wrong way. And maybe I have my own prejudices about them, which is totally, I can be honest about that. Maybe I do. But I tend to rather spend my time listening to Jeffrey Walensky's videos on stellar metamorphosis as opposed to listening to JRE. Right? I don't know why. Maybe I'm wrong about that, but we'll see. NGC says, no, the laws of human nature are not universal nature. Did I miss something? What did I miss? I think there are both laws and randomness. It's both simultaneously exist. It's like the little salt. The salt is the randomness, but there are essentially structures to the universe. But I think what people tend to not like about laws is that they're like, I didn't create the laws. They were created for me, and I'm a prisoner in these laws. But that's why recognizing the self as Atman, Atman being the self as Brahman, as the entirety of the thing, allows you to feel the self, allows the ego to have the ego trip that says, I created the laws. That's how you come into equilibrium with the system, by not being a victim, even though you may be playing the role of a victim. Because ultimately you still made your own body, even if you're... sorry, NGC, I wasn't trying to pinpoint. I'm just trying to read here out of the darkness of this room. That other dude. Oh, Walensky? Wait, is Walensky in here? Jeffrey Jolinsky. That's pretty good. The Solar Corolla. I was watching the Neil Armstrong talk about Sir Patrick Moore. If any of y'all know, that squinty, very haughty guy from BBC who is just has such an amazing accent, did The Sky at Night for like 40 years. So Sir Patrick Moore asks the Apollo astronauts, he's like, when you were walking around on the moon, did you notice anything with the dust? And then also, to follow up, when you looked up, did you see any stars around the solar corona? And Buzz Aldrin goes into this whole thing about the dust and the regolith. And then the weirdest moment, of course, the most watched moment on this press conference where everyone's looking at Neil Armstrong. And he's like, I don't recall seeing any of the stars on the solar corolla. And Michael Collins is like, I don't think we saw any stars. And people love this part of the video where it's just like the most awkward imaginable answer to one of the most obvious questions. By like this preeminent, TV personality, Patrick Moore, where he's like, come on, y'all, you're on the surface of the moon. What was it like to look up, and did you see stars? And you get the weirdest possible answer from these guys who were just on the moon 2 weeks ago. Anyway, I thought it was funny. Let's see. Jeffrey Jolinsky, though, I love it. Sometimes just a letter in the wrong place is just a good chuckle. Let's see, did I miss anything here? Again, I don't want to be shit-talking Joe Rogan or Lex Friedman or Jordan Peterson. For me, as a person who loves and will listen to pretty much anything, cats like that being kind of the gatekeepers of the mainstream thinking, and you'd say that you could argue that Lex Friedman has like all the brilliant minds on, but there's something about Lex that just gets to me, and I'm not sure what it is, but I think it's just the fact that he does a lot of the meandering science. I think all three of them actually are very meandering, even though Jordan Peterson I think is less meandering. Rogan and Lex, they'll have hours and hours of people talking and not come to a single actual conclusion. That's what it really is. That's actually what's going on. They just don't come to actual results. He's super smart. His dad is super smart. He had what's that other guy's name? One of the recent guys. Gosh, can't remember. But it'll come to Eric Weinstein. He had Eric Weinstein on. I watched the whole Eric Weinstein thing, looking for substantive conclusions, like juicy, interesting, new data, right? Lex Friedman, if somebody, talked about me versus Lex Friedman, they'd say, oh my God, Lex Friedman, look how many subscribers. He's super fit into CrossFit, and he does a podcast, and he's so smart. Be like, okay, great. Like, he's super smart, but listen to what he's talking about. Listen to what I'm talking about, and you'll see the difference. I think there's a huge difference. And I'm not saying that I need to be better than Lex Friedman. It's just when you really are talking about science, you can get somewhere. The people who are like, well, do you think the thing? But I think the thing and the thinking thing. But, well, if you think in a few years that maybe we can think about that thing, it's like, yeah, but if we think about it now, I'll tell you how complicated it is. No one will ever think about that thing because thinking about it's so hard. It's like, yeah, I know, but what about CrossFit? I'm like, are you fucking kidding me? Like, again, Sky Scholar, Jeffrey Walensky, Thunderbolts Project, Rupert Sheldrake, Eileen McCusick, Halton Arp, Eric Dollard, Ken Wheeler, the Primer Fields, David Lapointe, Eric Lerner, Anthony Peratt, what's his name? Hannes Alfane, Wal Thornhill, Stephen Crothers. Where are these guys? They're not on Lex Friedman. They're not on Joe Rogan. He doesn't talk about them at all. And so either he doesn't know anything, or they intentionally don't service people who are interested in things. Tell me I'm wrong about this. Like, they're not bad people. They're just trying to be famous. I'm sure Lex Friedman thinks he's doing a great service to the world, but I think they just don't give you anything meaty. It's all pretend. It's pseudo interesting. But like when you really, really cut it apart, and you know what you're talking about, and you know what the mainstream says, and you know what Eric Weinstein means with all his kind of going off on a thing, you realize you're like, okay, no, this cat is talking about nested fields. We already have understanding of field theory. This stuff is 100 years old. Like, it just drives me crazy that they just either intentionally won't progress, or they don't look up new things. Manos, what's going on? Nice to see you. Yeah, I've listened to Lex for again, I've tried to listen to everybody without, except for certain political figures who I absolutely will never listen to. Even Joe Rogan I listen to a little bit. Even Lex Friedman I listen to a bunch. Jordan Peterson very little, but again, nothing wrong. Good people. They do what they want to do, but I find nothing of substance when I listen to them. Like, really nothing that I can sink my teeth into. But look at like the gatekeeping level of it. More so what I'm saying is that like people won't go and read Pierre-Marie Robitaille's paper, but they will leave him a comment saying, you need to go talk to Joe Rogan. That's what I mean. Like, really? I mean, really? Like, Joe Rogan wouldn't know what, like, the first thing to say to Pierre-Marie Robitaille. And also, who cares about what Joe Rogan thinks when it comes to deciphering the cosmic microwave background radiation? You know what I'm saying? Like, the fact that Kirchhoff's law is so complicated, and black body radiation and what Dr. Robitaille is talking about is so cool and interesting and difficult, and he doesn't need to go on Joe Rogan for that to be more validated. It's just so ridiculous. Jordan Peterson did a great interview of Andrew Huberman. There's substance between them in it. Look, self-care and family organization, conservative values, traditionalism, cultural takes on cultural, like how culture should be or how we should return to traditionalism or the roles of family and shit like that. It's hard to talk about, to be honest. Like, I have an opinion, you have an opinion. Of course, somebody like Tim Robbins, Ted, is it Ted? Who's the big, Tony Robbins and Deepak Chopra, these big names, are going to have a lot more followers and a lot more screen time. But again, Andrew Huberman, again, pretty good guy. It's just tough. It's like the Wim Hof technique, or, you know, if you want to go down that rabbit hole and that's what you like to occupy your time with, I can respect that. But for me, it's just, I don't find anything really fun about it. It's quite difficult actually to get through a Lex Friedman podcast, knowing how smart he is and knowing how smart his guests are. For them to go around in circles for that long is actually infuriating. Think for yourself says, you're right, absolute gatekeepers for citizen slaves that don't know what their birth certificate means yet, right? Well, even if they do, what can they do, right? The Crown Corporation ain't going to let you do anything about it. What was it? There's a great line in a song. You're not going to get, you won't get far with the name they gave you. I don't know. But look, I think it's important if you note that we are the ultimate embodiment of the great creator, and we made our own bodies and we brought ourselves into this life. Even being enslaved by the system becomes okay. Does that make sense? It just becomes a role that we play to fulfill the great theater. Even if life is tough for some of us, life is very tough, some of it's not so tough, some of it's extremely extravagant, some of it's terrible, but each of those is an experience of the deity, because each of us made our own bodies and our own eyeballs and our own brains as babies. Good or bad, people make their own bodies, therefore you make your own existence, therefore we chose to have this experience we call life, therefore even a cabal, even UFOs, all this stuff is still part and parcel of an experience that we chose to have. Therefore, regardless of whether an Illuminati exists or you're poverty-stricken or people are slaves or Anunnaki exist, still doesn't matter. It just doesn't. All right, y'all. I think it's it for me. 2:48 a.m. Really fun show tonight. Talked about pretty much everything in one go. Nice to have you on the to welcome the new people. I see Think for Yourself. I haven't seen you here before, but you're welcome on the channel. Good to have you in the chat room. Silent says, I find neuroscience interesting and the philosophical questions about the point of things, but I listen to those ideas with a grain of salt. My focus is science, but I don't expect anyone to be that interested in it. Hey, as long as it does what you need it to do for you, that's what's important. So again, didn't want to shit on any any of these guys on YouTube. Like, they're all trying to make a living. They're all probably nice enough people. They probably would think I'm a nut job, and it's probably silly for me to sit and call them out. But I just wanted to talk about it a little bit in terms of just because I have been researching and there are answers out there, and then you have these huge channels that talk about, they just go around in circles. And they don't really talk about anything substantive. And when I say substantive, I mean stellar metamorphosis, human biofield extended mind, panpsychism, connected universe, consciousness being fundamental, the human eye and optics, the stack of stars, our chakras, holistic medicine, resonance. I could go on, right? But like, you think about how much they talk about, and they talk about none of what I just talked about. All right, everyone. You have a great rest of your night. I'll try and catch up with you tomorrow or the day after. If not, back when the moon is... that's not true. I think Jupiter and Saturn will be up, so I'll be doing a stream soon. Please share the video and leave me a comment about anything that you liked or didn't like in the show, and I'll try and talk to y'all. Also wanted to say thanks about... I didn't talk at all about the lunar wave stuff, but the last video did pretty nicely in terms of getting some comments and seeing all the old and new fans. It's fun to talk about and to show people the lunar wave. I think clearly, like, you can tell that I'm never really about the hype. I love the lunar wave and the idea, but tonight mostly was not about the lunar wave. So either way, it was a very cool capture, and we should talk about it next time. But thanks for leaving comments and for all the views and shares. All right, everybody. This is your captain signing off on another wonderful stream. I'm taking it out with Not So Far, version 6 for my friends and my fam. Yeah, if I missed anybody, I'm sorry. I'll catch you on the next one. And stay wise, stay brilliant, keep exploring, and just relax. It's all good. Things are not too bad right now.
Saw you on the train, it's 9 o'clock. Deep down, I thought you were